Right, you're very welcome back. It is 13 minutes past 8 this morning. I'm delighted to say Tommy Walsh is with us to help preview the weekend's hurling. Tommy, is anybody talking about anything other than the handshake at the weekend?
That is the first time I heard of it. Listen, I think there's so much spoken about that handshake for 2 or 3 weeks after the initial game up in Salt Hill. Not really. There's not much talk about that down here because I suppose we don't like controversy. We like keeping it simple, focused on the game. And I think myself, the two lads, like you heard Brian Cody's answer to Anthony Nash on Sky Sports. This isn't about Henry Shefflin, this is about Galway. And my experience with him in the dressing room is that's exactly the way it will be this week. They'll be so motivated when we're getting beaten by a last minute pint. And on the other side then, Henry Shefflin, like, it's Cody's going for his 18th Leinster Championship. I suppose he was brought in 1999. 18 of them. It's a remarkable record. Shefflin, you have to start somewhere. He's going for his first. He's not going up to Galway on them roads 2.5 hours, 3 or 4 times a week, just to maybe win a game in Salt Hill here or win a league game there. He's going up to win serious championships, national championships. So Shefflin will be highly motivated. He's up there for, you'd imagine 2-3 years max with the travelling. Like, it'd be impossible, I'd say, to go any longer. Barry buys a helicopter or his own airplane or something. So he will be so motivated to win this one.
Maybe if he wins in All Ireland, the helicopter will be laid on for him. So the one thing I would you're thinking about how this game is going to go, and you would tend to look back on previous matches. But what also history has shown us is that these games take on a life of their own. And what happened in one game, particularly between Kilkenny and Galway, there's literally no guarantee that anything that we've seen or learned from that match is going to be applicable the next day. Is that changed? Is there at least something that we can take from the game in Salt Hill and go, we're likely to see something similar in this area in Croke Park at the weekend?
Yeah, well, the one thing I would say is there'll be no fear on either team. I think this is a great rivalry. Listen to the lads on Off the Ball there, Paul Murphy and James Skehill and Will talking about during the week. Like, there is a huge rivalry since Galway came in 09. The reason that it probably doesn't have the same aura about it as maybe the Munster Championship games is, as they pointed out, they're not borderline counties, so that intense rivalry won't be there, say, in normal day-to-day life. When you're in the creamery or the shops or the pubs, there's no border towns as such. But another reason is the Croke Park factor. Like, as James Skehill rightly pointed out, like 30,000 people in Croke Park is far different than 10,000 people down in Welsh Park for, say, and to be the same. And if you're right, it's not just a Munster Leinster thing. We played them up in 09 up in Tullamore. That was probably the first game. The place was packed to the rafters. The atmosphere was electric. The crowd were, every puck they were pucking it with you. Every mistake you made, they were in shouting from the lines. You could hear that buzz around the place. Then go forward to 2014. There was the drawn match and the replay. Then I'd say was it Henry came on possibly, or maybe he started, and Joe Canning was on the other side. It was like, the older, he was like he was passing on the light. And I think Henry, one of them scored 1 point, and then the other equalised it. So we were seeing greatness, and we had an atmosphere to go with it. So they do, as you say, take on a life of its own. But then, like, we were winning that match, the first match, by, I'd say, 9 points with 3 or 4 minutes to go. And it looked like we were home and host into a Leinster final, and back came Galway. But going forward to the last match in Open Pier Stadium, again, atmosphere was electric, these home and away games. So I think this weekend will be much different. So the atmosphere won't be as electric. It'll be up in Croke Park, 7 o'clock in the evening, so there might be that many families that travel. They'll be expecting probably a crowd of maybe 25,000-30,000 people. So I think what we'll see different there, as opposed to the earlier round robin games, is there'll be huge space in Croke Park. When you play in a kind of an empty-ish stadium, and especially in Croke Park, it's absolutely massive. So I think the real hurlers that love the space and the speed, they will love it up here Saturday night. So you might see, the way they've been tight and tough and physical matches in the smaller pitches, I think this could be a very open game.
You said that there isn't that local rivalry between Galway and some of the counties based in Leinster. Is that actually the thing that sort of drives Brian Cody a little bit and sort of creates not a tension, but a sort of an incentive for Kilkenny to go out and beat Galway at every opportunity. This idea that, you know, they're not a Leinster county and they're coming into our province, and, you know, they're trying to break with the tradition of not being in the Leinster Championship, and that's something I wonder that sort of motivates Cody when it comes to games against Galway.
Well, first and foremost, he's a hurling man, and maybe in the initial stages, you know, you use that as a tool in your toolbox, on. But like what we've seen since '09 is Galway have added everything to the Leinster Championship, because they've just added a competitiveness. Like, you're at nothing if there's one team. We see the Leinster football at the moment. Dublin winning every, you know, game, be 10, 11, 12 points. That was the story for Kilkenny at one stage. But Galway coming into this championship has really, you know, raised the standards again, because Wexford have come up strong, Dublin have come up strong. So I think it's been an addition to it. But what will motivate Brian Cody is with Pearse Stadium. There's no doubt about it. You go back to 0-1 when Galway beat Kilkenny in the All-Ireland semi-final. Remember the clash before the game with Richie Murray and a few of the Galway lads were physically, you know, putting it up to the Kilkenny lads, and we felt that day that, you know, we were out physical, you know, they won the physical matches that day against Kilkenny, and it has never been like that since. So that still is in the back of Brian Cody's mind. That 2001 All-Ireland semi-final, I think his teams have been based, and their mindsets and their attitudes have been based on the failures of that match in 2001. And we've rarely, I'd say, if ever seen, you know, that happen again. Usually now, if Kilkenny are beaten, it's because we're maybe a better team. They weren't outmatched physically, or they weren't outmatched mentally. So I think it'd be more back to the 2001 game on, and Hill a couple of weeks ago.
That's interesting, because I would have always thought that, you know, Cork was the big motivating factor, and they probably were, to be fair, but that 2001 matchup between those two teams also is a little bit of fuel for the fire that helped your great team.
Yeah, well, I think as an overall mindset, that changed Brian Cody massively. He came back, you know, tougher. He made decisions based on the team as opposed to rewarding individual players. So as an overall mindset, I think that 2001 game against Galway had a huge, you know, it was a huge factor in the way Kilkenny teams were prepared going forward, both physically and mentally. And yeah, I think you're talking about the Cork game, that was all individually. So when you came up to an individual game, obviously there was huge rivalries within different counties.
In terms then of this weekend, like, what changes or what approach do either team take to try and take advantage, get your best players in the space that you're talking about, and make sure that they don't get crowded out if that is going to happen? And how, like, because it was such a ding dong at the end, you know, like, if that game had finished a draw, we would have been saying how flaky Galway were, having been pickpocketed the previous week as well and got in trouble at the very end. It happens 2 weeks in a row, begins to look like a pattern. They get away with it because there's a crazy free at the end, which I still don't know what the right answer to that one is, and it's like, catapulted straight into the Leinster final. So I kind of go back to my original question. I don't know anything about what's going to happen this weekend on the basis of what happened the last weekend, apart from the fact that Kilkenny are going to be highly motivated.
Yeah, well, they'll have to, if you go back to the Kilkenny game against Wexford, I think they're going to have to revert back to changing up their game plan. So against Wexford, when they were under pressure, like everybody talks about Wexford, great victory in Nolan Park, but Kilkenny for the last 20 minutes just lumped ball down on top of the full forward. Yes, some days that works for you, other days it doesn't. But the main thing is, in the modern game, there's so much video analysis going on, you have to change it up. So if you keep hitting long balls, well, your opposition know where the ball is going, so they can run into them positions. Whereas if you change it up, we'll say, Jared, a simple one. If a half hour comes short, gets the ball, the next ball that Richie Reid gets, Paddy Deegan gets, Hugh Lawler gets, or anyone, Mikey Carey in the half back line, well, the half back is going to have to mind the half hour, instead of, if they're used to Kenny half back line, just lumping ball down to the full forward line, well, they don't even have to look at the half hour. They can just sprint back and cover inside. So I think Kenny, like, I was looking at the score lines as well up in Pearse Stadium, Ger, like Owen Cody scored 1-2. Other than that, like, there wasn't much scoring from play. John Donnelly and Billy Ryan scored goals. Whereas you look at the Galway team up in Salt Hill, Joseph Cooney scored 4 points from play, Con Cannon scored 4 points from play, Johnny Cohen got a goal, and Tom Monaghan got 3 points. So straight away you can see Kilkenny were, you know, there's no individual stars really showing up. And what's going to change, Ger, I think at the moment Galway are the farm team coming into this Leinster final. I think Kilkenny have very, very good team, very, very good players. But I think we're not hitting a consistent form. So for Kilkenny this weekend, it'll either peter out like the game against Wexford, or it could be the start of a long summer. Because I don't know, do you agree with it? I know I listened to you over the years, momentum and does it matter? Does not matter? I believe it does.
I think
I agree.
What I think is confidence matters, right? And a team gets confidence from winning. When we're talking about momentum, we're talking about in the middle of a match where one thing happens, and then the other team suddenly decides, okay, that's the end of the match. I think that that's overblown in the middle of a game. But I do think players get confidence from something happening successfully and patterns of play emerging. And I think that if Kilkenny were to be the Leinster champions, not only is it an easier pathway for the rest of the season, but there is that kind of opportunity for them to, training will be much better just in terms of the confidence that lads have. Somebody will have to play really well for them to beat this Galway team. It'll also be a massive turnaround from the Wexford game for them too. So, that's my argument on momentum. I think that maybe we have different words for the same thing.
Yeah. So I think that, well, Kilkenny you're probably right, confidence. There's no player that you'd say, like if you look at the Clare team, you look at Dave Fisher, look at Tony Kelly, look at Shane O'Donnell, Peter Duggan, they look like, to me, from the outside, guys brimming with confidence. Guys that can't wait for the next match to come along, can't wait for the next training session. Could you say that about any of the Kilkenny players at the moment? There's not really, Mikey Carey on the half back line, you'd say, yeah, Mikey Butler, probably all defenders. So we need the Kilkenny forwards, I suppose, to start lighting fire, to see any sort, to give confidence to the public.
So, Adrian Mullen is a case in point. I thought, listening to Paul Murphy from, over the last month or so, there was harsh words being spoken about Adrian kind of needing to, this is his time now. He's still very young and he's coming back off the cruise ship, and the comeback has been slow. But, all of a sudden it's a Leinster final in Croke Park. If he was to score 5 or 6 points from midfield, you'd be like, well, that's what he's capable of doing. But that would be a transformative moment for Kilkenny as well if he was suddenly to find the form that we think he's capable of.
Yeah, but he'd be dependent on the backs giving him the right ball. Like you look at Cottle Mannion and Joseph Cooney, they're shooting the lights out over midfield. Tom Monaghan for Galway. But Adrian has done it in different games. And if you notice, the games that he's been doing it is when they're bringing the ball out through the lines. Now, I'm not saying you have to do it every time, but to go back to the Wexford game, I don't think you could have been at that game playing much ball out through the lines because they were so congested in the middle third. Nolan Park was a small pitch, especially when the Nolan Park is full. So I don't think the opportunity was there probably to give to Adrian Mullen short, towards it will be on Sunday. And Alan Murphy has been playing midfield. So you have two hurlers, two ball players, as opposed to two workhorses out there around midfield. The spaces will be there on Sunday, I think, in Croke Park. Will the Kilkenny backs give it to him? If they do, I think that's what Adrian Mullen, I think his form, he's probably one of the form players. I think when he's given the ball, he is on form this year. He's shown huge maturity. He's shown a guy that's going from young hurler into a senior type player. So I think he's dependent on the Kilkenny backline, giving him the ball out around the middle. Okay.
So it sounds like you think it's going to be a ding-dong. Do you have a sense that it's going to go Kilkenny's way? You certainly doesn't feel like you have the same lack of confidence in this Kilkenny team that some people have.
No, I have great confidence in the team, but I don't think they're in form. And that's why I think Galway are going to win it on Saturday night. I think I think Kilkenny have pound for pound players, the better players, if you look at the 1 to 15 versus the 1 to 15 for Galway. But I think Galway are just brimming at the moment. They're humming. They got their kind of bad game out of the way early on, and now they're the one against Wexford where they should have won it. They were winning coming into the home stretch, but they've been winning since. And I think they're a team playing with form, playing with confidence, and I think Galway will win on Saturday night. Okay, right.
Let's talk a little bit about Munster then, and what the implications are of a Munster final victory for Clare. No less than if Kilkenny were to be able to turn around and beat Galway, the benefit for that would be huge for them. I think for Clare, beating Limerick in a Munster final, it's almost more important than it is for Limerick, even though Limerick are chasing their own version of history.
Yeah, and for Limerick, you have the Mick Mackey Cup. It's the first year of the Mick Mackey Cup. So they renamed the Munster Championship winning trophy to Mick Mackey, the famed, one of the greatest players ever lived from Limerick. So it'll be huge motivation for Limerick to win that Mickey Mackey Cup. But on the opposite side of that, won't Clare be highly motivated to deny Limerick the chance of winning for the first time? And I think Clare, even if you go back and listen to the interviews from the great Clare winning team of 95 and 97, especially Shawnee McMahon, who people would have, I suppose, loved watching. He was the first probably centre back that we remember, long range free taker, scoring 5-6 points nearly most games. He was an inspiration. He was quite type of player, but tough as nails. Well, Shawnee McMahon, when he speaks about 1995, says the Munster Championship was nearly more important, or meant more to him at the time, than winning the All-Ireland. So you can tell by, that interview, like they won it for the first time, was it, since the 30s, and he cherished winning the Munster Championship more than the All-Ireland. It was probably because, coming from Clare, they were a very weak county before that team went on its run around 93, 94, 95. And so they probably, growing up in the 80s, Shawnee McMahon, them players, probably never dreamed of winning the Munster Championship. Now you fast forward that, they won 95 to 197, but the current team, some of them 2013, and we all thought they were winning 421s, or three, they won 421s, I think they won 3 in a row, but we thought that Clare team of the Shane O'Donnells and, Pod Collins, all that team, we thought they were going to go on and win a couple of All-Irelands. And have they even been to a Munster final yet? Maybe one since. So I think these guys will cherish a Munster Championship massively. I'd say Brian Nolan, coming from here, he is coming from, will be looking at no All-Ireland semi-final. Let's win the Mick Mackey Cup. So I think there'll be huge motivation from Clare, especially the rivals as well. We talk about Kilkenny and Galway, not borderline. Like, these are going to be massive local rivalries.
Are Clare well set up enough? Again, the last game between them, I think, doesn't really mean anything when it comes to this weekend, apart from the fact that Limerick were really close to them, even though they didn't have a full team or the full motivation of something up for grabs at the end of it. Now, I don't know if you can turn that on because there's a trophy sitting there when you run out for it. So I guess the question is, where are Limerick at the moment? How confident are we that they're back to the level that they were at when they were winning the All-Ireland last year?
Yeah, well, I suppose the worrying team for Limerick is Kyle Hayes is probably not in the form that we thought he would be, moving back up into the forwards. He had great the first day, but he hasn't been shooting the lights out or been on a huge amount of ball, and always been played inside quite a lot. You have, Keane Lynch is out injured. They're two of the, I suppose, my 4 pillars. There's the two of them, Gerard Hegarty and Tom Morrissey. Well, if 2 of them are kind of, one of them out of form and one of them is actually out, it's definitely, I suppose, for Clare, like, it has to be a motivation that, lads, we can do this. We've done it in the round robin series. We can do this again. Where do I see it? I think this Limerick team is playing out lovely for them. Everything is dictated by winning, by drawing. John Kiley, he didn't drop. He rested. I'd say Aaron Glan might have had a niggle or two. Rested Darragh O'Donovan. They still came out with a draw down in Ennis. If they had lost that game, you'd be saying, you can't turn on and off a light switch. So I think it's playing lovely, just like the league played for Limerick. So I think there'll be huge motivation down in Limerick. And I think we've, like the Leinster final, but I'm going to switch it around this time. I think Clare are the form team. I think you have David Fitzgerald shooting the lights out, midfielder that you wouldn't normally see as a scorer. You have John Conlon, you have Tony Kelly, Podge Collins, Peter Duggan, like, all these names are rolling off the tongue, really. So they are a farm team at the moment, Clare. But I think Limerick are just unbelievable. Like, Diarmaid Burns is hurling better than, I suppose, any half-back has hurled in so many years. He's scoring 6 points a game, because he would score 9 points in a game. But his overall defending, his high fielding, his catching, his overall game is absolutely outstanding. So I think that the physicality of this Limerick team will be so high on Sunday. I don't think Clare will be able to compete with it.
It was interesting listening to John Kiley in the build-up to this game. He said that the last couple of years actually really suited this management team because there were big gaps between games with no backdoor, and their planning, which we know is so meticulous and so in depth, it allowed them to do so much of that over the last couple of years. Whereas when we were back to a round robin scenario this year, he says that they maybe didn't get enough of a look at a team week in, week out. So I guess that probably places a huge degree of importance on this game for Limerick, that they're a team that really need to come through the front door. They really thrive with these big swathes of weeks between games, and the week in, week out nature perhaps actually doesn't really suit this team.
Yeah, well, looking back at our own experience, I think like when you have a great team like this Limerick team have, like generational players that will be talked about in many, many years to come, the whole thing about it is motivation and freshness. So it's going to work out better for them, Owen, when there's 3 or 4 week breaks. It's very difficult to keep it going week after week after week. So I do agree with you on that, but I think everybody's in the same boat at the moment. John Kiley has been lucky. He's been able to rest players. He has players come back from injury as the latter stages. No matter what goes on this Sunday, they're going to be still in the championship. He'll have Cian Lynch to come back. He'll have players come back into form. He'll be hopefully Kyle Hayes will come back into a bit of form. They might find his best position. But, Seamus Flanagan is back. So I think, listen, it's the same for everybody. Yes, it would suit them that bit better with a couple of weeks break. But I still think they'll have enough to do with that this weekend. Like, even if I was looking at a few of the matchups, like Tony Kelly, we're all talking about Tony Kelly and the greatness he has been on the field for the last couple of years. I have a feeling whoever he marks on Sunday on the half-hour line, whether it's centre forward on Declan Hannon or on the wing on Diarmaid Burns or maybe Dan over the other side, I think they will have Will O'Donoghue tracking him. And Will O'Donoghue is a giant of a man. Like, he's going around, he's a menace out around the middle. He's in lads' faces, he's there for every breaking ball. Every time you see a forward on the opposition soloing through, Will O'Donoghue is always behind him at somewhere. He's chasing him down. He's like an angry bear out around the middle of the field. So I think he will be tracking Tony, just there in his face the whole time, you know. Other matchups I was looking at, like Diarmaid Burns, Shane O'Donnell. I think that will be a great one on Sunday. Diarmaid Burns, form of his life. Shane O'Donnell the same, kind of the big guy versus the little guy. So he'll be looking for the ball low, short, go around Diarmaid Burns. Diarmaid Burns will be looking for it high and long and try and win that aerial battle. But I think there's some fascinating battles this weekend.
That Will O'Donoghue shout is interesting, because if you asked me who would win in a fight, Tony Kelly or an angry bear, you might actually say Tony Kelly would win, such as the talent of the man. So, like that, I'm not sure that kind of feels a bit out of left field, but obviously it's something that could easily happen this weekend. So who do you see winning that battle? Do you see Tony Kelly having the smarts to be able to get around a man marker with the physicality of O'Donoghue? Yeah, well, that'd be a 2-on-1. I don't think Will O'Donoghue will take him up 1v1. Right. So I think he'll be tracking him. So it's very difficult to do, because when you look at David Clifford in the football, when he's left alone man on man, he wins that battle every time. When you put 2 or 3 men back covering the spaces, covering in front of him, much more difficult. But that's where the rest of the guys come into it. And that was the great, I suppose, confidence booster that Brian Lohan will feel after the last round, is when he rested all these guys and they shot the lights out. So Dave Fitzgerald. So if they do put Will O'Donoghue, that'll leave a free man out around the middle. So you'd be hoping for a clear then Dave Fitzgerald or someone, Cotton Malone or someone will take it on, Peter Duggan out around there, and they will take the heat off Tony. So I think if that happens, the heat goes back on the other player forwards, and can they, help in the score. And they proved they can do it.
One last thing before we get your shout out. The difficulty and the reason why so much is invested in these games is still because it's very difficult to recover from the defeat. And what a puncture it would be for all of the air in Clare's balloon if they were to lose this weekend. Are they well equipped enough to come through this and still reach an All-Ireland final, say? Are they that good that actually, they shouldn't be too devastated if they lose this game, because there's still a big prize for them here?
Well, I think they'll be devastated if they lose it, because they don't come around too often. Like we've seen Clare, like they're in the form of their lives at the moment. Like all their players, from the goalie right through to number 15 and the subs coming on. Like when you drop 6 players, Ger, and you still go on and beat Waterford by what they've beaten by in the last round, like that's a team in form, that's a panel in form. That's a management, even the supporters. Like everybody is behind this team at the moment. I think now is the time for this Clare team. So if they lose the Munster final, they will be devastated. And can they pick themselves up? Sure, it'll just depend on when the next match is and who it's against. But I think they'll play the Joe McDonagh, winners or losers the following week. So it'll be, straight back on the horse and trying to win it. But I don't even think they'll be thinking about this. Going back, can they win an All-Ireland, Ger? I think Limerick are on top of the tree at the moment. And I really honestly believe that everybody else is a 50-50 game. I don't think there's anyone a little bit above anyone down the pecking order. So I think it's a very even championship. And like Tom Brady often said in American football, you have to be ready for when your opportunity arises. So people can't be worried about, geez, can we beat Limerick? Someone might beat Limerick, and then you have to be ready to go on and win it.
Yeah.
And the best case in point, Ger, will be 2019. Nobody thought anyone would beat Limerick. Kilkenny beat them in the semi-final. Well, if Tipperary hadn't been winning their games on the other side, they wouldn't be All-Ireland champions. And they went on and they beat Kilkenny in the final, you know.
Yeah, maybe if Richie Hogan hadn't been sent off, Kilkenny would have been the champions too. We'll see. We'll never know, I suppose. Come here, who's your shout out this week?
Yeah, and just before I go on that one, just one big match I think we'll have a big bearing on Sunday's win is Aaron Gillette versus Rory Hayes. I think Rory Hayes is a slight guy. He's small, he's out in front, he's tough, tigerish. But Gillette is massive. As regards, he's in the air, he's massive on the ground physically, and he's playing with huge confidence at the moment. So I think that'll be a huge battle, and whoever wins that one could have a huge bearing on the game as well.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, so the shout-outs this week, I went with the team of the Munster and Leinster final, obviously, this week. So I went with 3 great finals of the past. I'll start with the Munster final of 1944. I wasn't at it, or at it. I read about it. But why, you'll probably say, why would you pick out the 1944 one? Cork and Limerick were against each other in Thurles, but it was called the Great Bicycle Final. So the war was on at the time, and there was emergency travel restrictions. So most people that went to that game had to cycle to the final. Imagine if you asked people to cycle to it now, what happened? Everyone giving out for the game at 7 o'clock of a Saturday evening, the Leinster final. But they walked, they ran, just reading about it. They came on horse-drawn carriages. Some people came in train, but it was just supposed to be a magical occasion. And it finished then with, I think, Mick Mackey had a free to win it for Limerick. That tailed off wide. Who had stepped up the match-winning goal? Christy Ring.
Wow.
So the 1944 is the first final that I give a shout out. Second one then is the Leinster one. 1996, Wexford versus Offaly. 223 to 215. Liam Griffin was over Wexford at the time. Imagine doing this now with social media and WhatsApp and Twitter and Instagram. When they were driving to that game on the Wexford-Wicklow border, and he came up with this idea himself, and it was very much a risky move because he could have looked like fools either. But no, he went to his gut and said, listen, this is going to happen. He got them all off the bus and they walked over the border. And his idea behind that was that when they walked back to Wexford, they'd walk back with the Bob O'Keefe Cup. I thought it was an inspirational thing to do, a risky thing to do for him, but it worked out in the end. And I remember we played an under 14 match against the Village Ryan A League, and the Village would be a top town team at the time. But the day before was that Leinster final. I remember Larry Murphy. I still remember this today. He was going around blocking lads with his head. I think someone in the commentary team even said it. Like some lads wouldn't even put their hurl or Larry Murphy would put in his head. And remember that match the following day? We were all going to go out blocking lads our heads and our hands. And it was. I still remember that. You know, so many years later. So Tom Dempsey scored 1-5 that day. Martin Storey 5 points. Larry Murphy 4 points, Eamon Scallon 4 points, Damien Fitzgerald scored a goal from a penalty. So a magical day for Wexford, a magical day for a lot of guys. The last one I give the shout out to is 2002 Munster final. It was 39 years since Waterford had won a Munster championship. Waterford, if you can, people wouldn't remember probably back then, but say when I was maybe 9 or 10, Waterford were far from a powerhouse in Munster at the time. They only came with that kind of Ken McGrath, Ryan Green, team. And so Tony, the score, I don't know what the score was, but Tony Brown scored a goal. I remember he ran and ran, and the ball just broke, and he pulled the ball to the back of the net. And it was just an inspiration, and they never thought, I suppose, they beat Tipperary in the Munster final. Brian Green, we all remember that the photograph, he was down on his knees, looking up into the sky, and just a magical moment. So John Milan, I think, scored 4 points, and that was a great fight. So there are my 3 shouts for this week.
Waterford 223, Tipperary 312 was the score in that way. So they blew them out in the end. Colin Boog wants to know, is that say again?
Ken McGrath scored 7 points from play.
That's sensational, like, when you think about it. Like, and then did G ruin their year in the semi-final? Is that what happened?
2002, they won that. We bet clear in the final. Jeez, I can't remember that, would you believe? 2002. My head is gone. 2002, we beat Clare in the final. I think Clare beat Waterford in the semi-final. We beat Tipperary in the All-Ireland semi-final, and it was Clare beat Waterford in the other semi-final.
I'm trying to quickly look it up here, but you're probably right. You remember better than... Yeah. That's exactly it. Yeah, Clare won 16, Waterford won 13.
Yeah, because a great friend of mine and a guy that brought us our county final intermediate and club All-Ireland after years of heartbreak and lost, Jimmy Coogan. Jimmy scored 1-1 in that semi-final against Tipperary. DJ Carey came on for his first game back. He came back around after the Leinster final, and this was after not playing for the whole winter. And he came back, and just the place lit up. And our kind of whole mindset, we only won that Leinster final, let's say, be 1 or 2 points against Wexford. But we just got going after that. DJ was sensational. Solo threw a ball from midfield. Hand passed it, like he would only see. Hand passed it as Jimmy Coogan, and Jimmy buried it. And beat Tipperary that day. And Tipperary were All-Ireland champions during 2001. But no, it was Clare beat Waterford in the other semi-final.
Very good. Great stuff. Tommy, thanks a million. Cheers. Enjoy the weekend.
Okay.
Tommy Walsh giving us his thoughts ahead of the weekend, and 2 decent games, it's fair to say. We should be looking forward to those. That's your Saturday night and Sunday afternoons looked after.
Yeah, it's good weekend of GA, to say the least, in both codes.
We'll talk about the football over the rest of the week as well. And if you want your football fix, you'll get it tomorrow night in the Royal Theatre in Castlebar in celebration of Mayo football. It'll be a look at the championship race and obviously this weekend's games and much more as well. It's the Football Pod Live in Castlebar tomorrow. Tickets on sale at otbsports.com/events. You can join Paddy Andrews, James O'Donoghue and Tommy Rooney. We'll go through the papers now.